Hi guys, it's Kelly here, and I'm back with another video. Today's video is featuring the new release. It's like a mini release from W+9. They have the Just Breathe set, which is on the left. Beautiful font. Totally love the little sketchy bird and the flower. And then on the right is the Wildflower set. That is the set that we are going to be using today. This is a piece that I did to make sure that I knew what I was doing. We will be using this to make a card, and I'll also be making two other ones. If you clicked on this video because you are interested in knowing how to add texture to your cards without embossing folders and you're not interested in the stamping, you might want to jump to like the 13-minute mark. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm doing a little bit of, I think Jennifer referred to it as glow stamping, but I actually learned about this technique from Dawn herself, the owner of W+9. So what we're doing is we're going to be stamping our salad images on dark cardstock. For me, I did all my cards in black with white pigment ink, and then I am going to stamp on top of it with Distress Oxides. Now, when I learned it from Dawn, she did not use Distress Oxides because they weren't out yet. She used pigment ink and did it on like a craft paper, which also works. But today, this is the way that I wanted to do it. Now, I do want to note that with this particular card, I am doing a stamp above and a stamp below so that they're symmetrical. But I moved them before I stamped the color the first time, and I wouldn't recommend doing that. From here on out, I'm not going to flip the paper back and forth. I'm just going to stamp the white pigment ink down. In my case, I used Hero Arts Unicorn ink. It is, I think, one of the only white pigment inks I have just because it works so well. I didn't need another one. And then I'm going to go in with the Distress Oxides. Distress Oxides work so well because they also have pigment properties, which just means that they stamp more solid. They're far more opaque than other types of ink. So if you want to use a pigment ink, it will work with a dye ink. I don't know if it'll work on black or cardstock this dark. It will work on craft though. If all you have is a dye ink, which is what most inks are. So here I did my best to kind of line them back up. It wasn't 100%, but it was close enough for government work for me. And then from here on out, I will just be stamping the white, cleaning my stamp, and then stamping the next color of Distress Oxides. And I just wanted you to see the process. You guys know that I'm a big fan of showing the whole creative process, all of the making as much as I can in my videos, just so if there's a specific thing you're looking for, you can find it in the process. When I stamp the second card, I will it'll be more abrupt, but it'll be the second time that you're seeing it. So here you might notice that I am stamping right over my previous stamping with no masking, and that is a benefit of pigment inks, honestly, because they are more opaque. You don't have to mask. The color will cover up the previous color with really no issues. So for this card, I kind of worked for my edges in, and then I felt like the sides were a little bit, I don't know, like a little bit lonely, a little bit not sparse, maybe, I guess is the word I'm looking for. They were a little bit sparse on the edges. So I am going to add just a little bit of extra stamping with just the small branch. And then I think on the other side, I used like the little fern style branch. You may also notice that when I'm inking up my stamps, I'm using two different colors, and I didn't really have any issues because the stems and the floral portions were so far apart. I didn't really have any contamination, but if you get ink where you don't want it, just wipe it off with a baby wipe. So now that the stamping is done and the Distress ink is dry, the Distress Oxide is dry, that's something that's important. For this card, And I didn't do it for all of the cards, but I am just going to go in and show you that you can add a little bit more shading or a little bit more intense color right over top of this with your colored pencils. So again, not necessary. It's very pretty on its own and you can see the colors, but if you really kind of just want a little bit of pop, and I didn't fill in the whole image. I just added like a little line in my leaves, and then kind of blended that out with a little bit of a lighter color, and I let my Distress Oxide be my highlight. I didn't fill the whole thing in. I just added little bits of color so that it would be more vibrant. But again, this is, I mean, I've done this technique a bunch of times where I've stamped on colored cardstock, and then, colored it in with my colored pencils. It's a beautiful way to do it. And this is something that you can add to this particular type of stamping, to just kind of like bump it up a notch. So the last time that we were together, we talked about Molly and her adventures. And I told you I wasn't really sure about how to tell the story about Molly without including like the ongoings of the rest of the week. So I told you she busted out, she busted her metal cage. She busted out. She had to sleep in our bedroom upstairs. The next morning, and Eric flat out told me, he was like, I heard you talking to her in the middle of the night, and I was like, she's lost her mind. What is this dog doing upstairs? She's completely off her rocker. Which, to be fair, I kind of am most of the time. But he's like, and then when I went downstairs in the morning and I saw the cage, and I was like, oh, never mind. Super glad I didn't say anything to her about her being crazy. So before he went to work that morning, he actually bent her crate back into place and then re-secured it with zip ties to hold it back together so I would be able to use it during the day. And that was super helpful because I actually did need that crate. So before I went to bed, the night that she slept on the floor, I got on Facebook Marketplace and I went and looked at playpens. So Eric had sent me a message, probably, I don't know, a week before that, about these like massive playpens. They're like 5 feet by 6 feet. And he was like, what about getting this for Caitlin? Because we have a hard time kind of keeping her quarantined now that she's crawling again. And she's army crawling for the most part, but she is starting a little bit to get her knees up under her. And even with the army crawl, she's fast. So we've had a little bit of trouble keeping her kind of contained. And the playpen that we had was a little bit on the smaller side. She doesn't really like to self-entertain. Real talk. God didn't give me children that want to entertain themselves, and God didn't give me children that want to be good sleepers. I don't really know why. Because I love sleep, and I like to be by myself doing my things. So it's very confusing for me. So here, moving on to the next card, I wanted to use these cute little hexagon dies. And so I'm just tracing the outline so I know where to concentrate my stamping because I will be die cutting this out. I know that it's hard to see on camera, but if you tilt it in the light and in real life, you can see the lead. So here I just kind of laid everything out how I wanted them to be grouped together. And then I'll put my 2 outermost stamps in place, stamp those, and then work my way inside. And we're doing the same thing. White pigment ink first, cleaning the stamp, and then stamping into the Distress Oxide. So that hasn't changed. This one's just going to be a little bit faster because we've already seen it once. So before I even went to bed, I got on Facebook Marketplace and started looking for these massive playpens because I was like, that's maybe she doesn't like being in the crate. She doesn't like being so confined. Maybe I can put her in the playpen. And then obviously we'll still have it for when, we need to keep Caitlin contained. So I find a lady who is selling one on Facebook Marketplace. She has it at X price point, but it's been on there for a week. So I offer her about $20 less because I figured even if she was like came back with the middle of the road, I'd still pay that. So she got back to me first thing in the morning and she was like, yep, I'll take it. I was like, perfect. I'll pick it up today. So I went and picked up that playpen. when Eric came home from work, we set it up. We put Molly in Caitlin first in the playpen so she could play around. And then once she went to bed, put Molly in the playpen. I put pillows and blankies in there. I laid in there with her. We had snuggles and cuddles and belly rubs. And I was like, okay, awesome. This might work. Like, this is going to be good. So, I went upstairs. Like I said, Caitlin was in bed. I went upstairs. Eric was in the shower. No, he was in bed already. No, he was in bed already. He's a day shift guy now. He was in bed already. I came upstairs to do something for work, like some sort of card making thing. And I'm sitting here and I hear Emma come up the stairs. And so she comes into the craft room. I'm looking at Emma. I'm looking her in her face. But I am still hearing dog toenails on the floor. But I'm looking at the dog that's free, but there's dog toenails on the floor. And I'm like, she jumped it. She jumped the playpen. And sure enough, I went downstairs and she's pacing at the bottom of the stairs trying to figure out how she's going to get up the stairs with this bum leg because she jumped the playpen. Back to the card. So here, I just wanted to show you that it really does work, the overstamping another color. So here I decided that I wanted a few of the leaves from this outside leaf to be in the forefront. And so I just kind of went in and removed the color of the ones that I still wanted to be behind and then stamped them right over this purple, this wilted violet, and it worked beautifully. It's solid and it's good. So here is kind of where we're at. These are all the pieces that we have going on. The one on the left has a little bit of colored pencil and a white highlight. The middle, just colored pencil. The right is just the stamping. Now, they're not going to stay this way, but I wanted you to see the difference. Here, I'm going to go ahead and die cut my hexagons out so that I have the piece that I'm going to be working with. So I ran that through my Platinum 6, and I am going to go ahead and add the white highlights. I just wanted to show you how I did that. This is not, and this will probably be the hardest part for most people. There is no rhyme or reason. I'm not even making sure that I make solid lines. I'm just kind of going in and swiping the pen, on the top of the leaves, under the leaves, doing little dots for where the flowers are. And to me, this elevates this stamping so much. This white gel pen highlight just so much, really makes it pop off the page, really makes it just look like something that you would want to give a second look to versus, just kind of how flat it looks. It's still very pretty even without the white gel pen, but to me the white gel pen is just like bam pow, super cool card. So you'll have to let me know what you think in the comments, whether or not this made a huge difference for you as well or not. So now we're going to move on to the texture part. So the first way that you can add texture without embossing folders, and not that embossing folders are super expensive, but it's just not something that everybody has or has the capabilities to do, is you can use either a scoreboard or your paper trimmer and a bone folder to add dry embossing with your bone folder. So here I'm doing some vertical stripes. You can do them vertical, you can do them horizontal, you can do them diagonal. Diagonal gets a little tricky for the spacing, but all of this will work to give you texture in your background. I started off by doing 1/2 inch stripes. So there's a 1/2 inch between each one. And then I looked at it with the piece, the stamped piece, and I just didn't like it. I just wasn't a fan. So I decided I was going to go back in, and instead of doing every 1/2 inch, I was going to do every 1/4 inch, which makes it more look like beadboard kind of thing in the background. And then full disclosure, the part that you can use either side, the front side or the back side. When I put the card together, I ended up using the back side. So not the part that it was indented, but the part that was kind of embossed out. is the part that I use to build my card. But this is a super easy way that you can just add a little something extra if you want that texture, but you don't have an embossing folder. Or maybe, you don't want to spend the money on the simple embossing folders and you want to save your money for the ones that are more intricate. This is a good way to do this, is by adding stripes. Way number 2 that you can add dimension and texture to your backgrounds without an embossing folder. This will work with any sort of stacking dies. So for me, I have the hexagons here from W+9 because that's the shape that I chose to use. But you could do circles, you could do squares, any sort of stacking die that you already own. If you fit them all in there, and I actually did end up putting that little one back in, will give you these frames. And these frames in the same color, so like tone on tone, will give you this extra texture in the background without having to have any sort of embossing folder. So here, the Tombow Mono Multi Glue is repositionable. You guys, if you watch my channel, you know this is kind of my go-to. I am going to use this to hold my piece in place, not completely adhere it. You have to wait until the Tombow Mono Multi Glue is dry in order for this to work. So I'm going to use that as a placeholder, and then I'm going to glue down this first frame. So I'm going to adhere that down with the glue wet so that it is tone on tone. It's creating that texture, but we're going to keep building out from that. So this first one goes down, wet glue, permanent adhesion. The next one I'm going to use as a placeholder. So for this one, I'm going to use just a couple of dots of the Tombow Mono Multi Glue in the corners. And then I'm going to tap it, make sure that it's dry before I put it on my paper, because I'm just using it as a placeholder. The hexagons are going to hang off the edge of my card, okay? I'm fine with that. They're going to hang off the edge. I'm going to trim them off after I get everything adhered. So now I'm going to put my placeholder hexagon down, just so that way I know everything is matching up and it's going to be even. And then my final frame, I'm going to, again, wet glue, permanent adhesion. I'm going to put this down to my card. For sure, this one will be, you can see the other one is already hanging off a little bit. This one will definitely be hanging off. It's very large for an A2 size card, but I'm going to go ahead and glue that down. And then once I'm happy with the dry time and stuff, I'm going to I'm going to remove these placeholder pieces, and I'll just set that aside and use it for another card. I'm going to remove my stamped piece. And then it's hard to see, but once I tilt it in the light, you'll be able to see, after we get these pieces trimmed off, that there is this texture that the tone on tone cardstock has created that's going to make our card more interesting, but isn't going to take away from our stamped piece. It's going to accent it, which is kind of the point when you're using texture in the background. So once that is done, I'm going to add some foam tape to my stamped piece. I will put that back into the center of these hexagons, and then outside of the sentiment, like this card will be complete. So see, you'll be able to see how cool that looks with the hexagons in the background, and it's just giving us just more interest and more dimension. For this piece, I masked too big of a section. It just happened. The 2-inch tape was just too big, and so I decided to trim it off. For the third way that we're going to add texture in the background without an embossing folder, how many times have I said this now, is going to be heat embossing, tone on tone heat embossing. And this is a great way to add texture because you don't need you don't need a die. You don't need a die cutting machine. If you don't have a scoreboard or you don't have a bone folder, you already have these stamps. Clearly, you've just used them to make your card. So doing this, I mean, you have to have the tools to heat emboss, but I think most of us do. It's a pretty common tool. So I treated the whole paper with my anti-static tool. Now I am stamping down in Versamark, which is just a sticky clear ink. And then I'm going to heat emboss it in clear. Now, you could use black, but black embossing powder is kind of messy. And oftentimes it's just easier to stamp in black and then emboss in clear, or stamp, in this case, like I'm stamping on black. So I just stamped in clear and embossed in clear. It's still going to give me a really great result and that texture that I'm looking for, but it's going to be tone on tone. This one, I'm going to be honest with you, is my favorite background. I just think that it looks so elegant. This tone on tone with this little bit of shine in the background. You see specialty papers like this all the time in the craft stores, and they sell for much more money than a regular cardstock because it is a specialty paper, but you can totally make your own, and it's beautiful with just clear embossing powder. So once that is done, I'm going to start building this card. And again, I just popped it up on foam. I did trim around my flowers so that it wasn't covering up all of that beautiful background. So I just hand trimmed, like fussy cut, trimmed around them. Not too close, but just enough that it wasn't covering up all that background. And then I'm going to move on to the sentiments. So anywho, she's jumped the playpen. She's pacing downstairs, trying to figure out how she's going to get up these stairs. So I am like, what am I going to do with this dog? Like, they gave us these pills, these pain pills. This is all 3 cards complete with all of their white highlights, and now just the sentiments. For the sentiments, I used W+9's basic greetings dies. I cut out a couple of those and put them together with kind of a shadow. I wasn't sure if I was going to do white or gray, so I cut them out of all 3 colors, and I ended up using 2 that I cut out of white and 1 of the blacks. The little labels, the heat emboss labels that you see up there, are actually sentiments from the Just Breathe stamp set that I used as like my sub sentiments to go with my dies. So I'm like, what am I gonna do with this dog? They gave me these pain pills. They're supposed to keep her sedated. Obviously, there's no sedation happening in our household. So thankfully, Eric had put the crate back together because I am trying to figure out what to do with her. I call the vet. They're open 24 hours. They're an emergency vet. I tell them, hey, my dog just had the surgery, but she's, like, at this point, she's more active than she's been in, like, a year, trying to get out of all the ways I'm trying to trap her in. What, like, can I just leave her out? And she was like, try giving her like 2 Benadryl and then calling and talking to the doctor to get the anti-anxiety meds, because like clearly the pain meds are not enough to keep her down. So I end up putting her back in the crate that Eric fixed so I could go upstairs and what was I doing? I think I was looking for like other ideas for how to keep her, because obviously I didn't have the anti-anxiety meds. And I think I wanted to check the weight on her Benadryl. But anywho, while I was upstairs, Caitlin woke up. She started crying. And so she literally only cried for like 1 second before I was in her bedroom, because a lot of times she just lost her pacifier. So here I'm just accenting with a couple of pearls. These are from Honeybee Stamps. Totally love them. This is the Ocean Waves one. Now that all my sentiments are put together, and then I'm going to add some shimmer. So I go in to check on Caitlin to, hunt down her pacifier. It's dark in there. We do have a night light, but it's dark in there. So I'm trying to like feel around to find her pacifier. And what ends up happening is I stick my hand in a giant pile of baby vomit. That is what happens. It's not spit up. It's full blown throw up. And I'm going to leave you with that. That will be the continuation of our next story. So all 3 of these are done. These are available in the W+9 store. I will link them below. I totally appreciate when you guys shop through my links. It's at no extra cost to you, but it does help support my channel and my family. I hope that you learned a little bit of something, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye.